Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, Mr. Chair, we can hear you.
Can you hear my wife's clarinet?
A little bit.
Oh, good. She says she'll knock it off at 10, but we'll see.
Scott or commissioners, I'm doing an audio check. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And I'll do the same. Can you hear me, Scott?
Yes, sir.
Great, thank you.
I decided to go to the Taos Gorge Bridge for this meeting.
Live action cam right there.
Well, I tried to drive to Santa Fe this morning and turned around at Madrid. It was just not good.
Well, I-25 was closed briefly at Santo Domingo too. So.
Hmm. Yeah, I bet the East Mountains were probably just really getting pounded.
Right.
Yeah, it's just rain in Albuquerque, but get north of Bernalillo, it gets bad, I guess. Plus East Mountains.
I have literally like a foot of snow on my picnic table here.
Wow.
Yeah.
I was on the train and we left Albuquerque. It was just raining, but the further north we got, we went from a little sprinkle to like an inch, 2 inches, 3 inches. And by the time, we were halfway, I'm like, oh boy, this does not look like a sprinkle anymore. And here we are.
Yeah, I'm glad you got there safely.
Yes, thank God for Rail Runner.
Okay, looks like we've got 3 commissioners in OGC, so I think we can get started. So this is Pat O'Connell calling to order the New Mexico Public Regulation Commission regular meeting for Thursday, November 30th, 2023. We are on Zoom today because the office in Santa Fe is closed due to inclement weather. So having called the meeting to order, Mr. Cameron, can you call the roll?
Yes, Commissioner Aguilera, Present. Commissioner Ellison,
Present.
Commissioner O'Connell.
Present.
All commissioners are present. You have a quorum, Mr. Chair.
Great, thank you. Next up is a Pledge of Allegiance and the state pledge. So I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, indivisible, one nation, under God, with liberty and justice for all. And then I also salute the flag of the state of New Mexico, the Zia symbol of perfect friendship among united cultures. Thank you for that. Next item is consideration and approval of the agenda. We posted this agenda Monday morning. Commissioners, did you have any changes you wanted to make to this agenda?
Mr. Chair, I did want to ask if we could take item 2 from the consent items and place it onto the regular. I would like to hear from Mr. Fisk and ask a question or two.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Any requests or suggested changes, Commissioner Aguilera?
I do not have any additional changes.
Okay, so then I move that we adopt the agenda posted with the change of moving consent action item utility matter number 2 from the consent agenda to the regular action items. And I'll propose that we just take that as our first utility matter.
A second.
Sorry, I guess the order isn't that important, but maybe just so that we can manage this better, I'll say let's take this as the third utility matter, so Mr. Fisk doesn't have to jump back and forth. Okay, so we've got motion in a second. Any more discussion?
No.
All right, so could you call the roll, Mr. Cameron?
Commissioner Ellison,
Aye.
Commissioner Aguilera, aye. Commissioner O'Connell.
Aye.
The motion passes unanimously, Mr. Chair.
Great, thank you. So I got a communication for Mr. Rodriguez. We didn't have anybody registered for public comment prior to the meeting, and then we're not in person, so there isn't anybody in the room to give public comment. So just want to double check that there is no public comment today.
That is correct, Mr. Chair.
Great, thank you. Next up is announcements. Start with Office of General Counsel. I guess big announcement is we're on Zoom, so that happened. But I think you've got at least a recitation.
I do. Thanks, Mr. Chair. Yes, we are on Zoom. We had sort of prepared for this yesterday and then brought it together this morning. I appreciate those of my folks who are already on the train early and are there in the office holding down the fort. And before I do the recitation, I just also wanted to give a shout out to the General Counsel team, my team, for over the past few weeks and continuing until right through the end of the year and maybe even a little more. They've been working pretty closely with the hearing examiners to help out on some of the bigger cases. Some of them directly as co-hearing examiners, others of them more behind the scenes. Everybody really, pulling together nicely to support each other and help out with the agency as a whole. So I really appreciate that. So the recitation is from a closed meeting that we held on November 21st. 2023, the commission met in executive session, which was closed pursuant to NMSA 1978, section 1015(1) H3, deliberations by a public body in connection with an administrative adjudicatory proceeding. I affirm for the record that the matters discussed in the closed session were limited only to those specified in the notice and agenda for that meeting, specifically deliberations regarding case number 22-00270-UT in the matter of the application of Public Service Company of New Mexico for revision of its retail electric rates pursuant to advice notice number, and I don't have the advice notice number on my document, but the docket number again is 22-00270-UT.
Yeah, thank you for that. Any more announcements from Office of General Counsel?
That's all I have, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Okay, so I'd like to second your shout out to the OGC staff and then also emphasize that the hearing examiners have really had a lot going on over the last couple of months, and I appreciate their efforts. And it looks like we're getting through all this mountain of work together, so that's great. Next up, I've got a recitation from a closed session that I was in attendance for. So I'll read that now. So on November 16th, 2023, the commission met in executive session, which was closed pursuant to NMSA 1978, section 10-15-1 H2, meetings regarding limited personnel matters. I affirm for the record that the matters discussed in the closed session were limited only to those specified in the notice and agenda for that meeting, specifically discussions regarding discussion and assessment of exempt positions, discussion and assessment of advisory staff applicants, discussion of hiring, promotion, assignment of individual public employees. I further affirm that no official or final actions were taken.
Mr. Chair, can I say one more comment about my recitation? Or
Yes.
two things. One, just to clarify for the record that it wasn't the full commission that met in that executive session. It was two of the commissioners, Aguilera and Ellison. You were not in attendance at that session because you're recused from that case. And then also the last part I forgot, which is to affirm that no official or final actions were taken during that closed session.
Yeah, thank you for that. Okay, so I think we've got the recitations done, and then just wanted to highlight that between now and our next expected public meeting, which will be December 14th, there's going to be two public hearings. First one is on El Paso Electric's Transportation Electrification Plan, case 23-00231 UT. That's going to start on Monday, December 11th. So if you're interested in commenting on that case, please check our webpage for the time and process for participating in that hearing. And then, as always, you can watch it on YouTube if you don't want to make public comment. And then immediately following that, case 23-000195 UT P&M's Transportation Electrification Plan hearing will begin on Wednesday, December 13th. So those are two opportunities for public comment and to view the work that the commission is doing that'll come up between now and our next public meeting. Commissioners, did you have any additional announcements?
No, thank you. I do not.
Neither do I.
Great, thank you. And then I'm going to turn it over to our Chief of Staff, Choya Corey, for announcement of a couple new employees who have started.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. Just one employee this pay period new this week. Tatiana Perez Valero, has joined us in the hearing examiner's office. And so she's our new hearing examiner. Very excited to have her. I don't see her on Zoom, and given the weather conditions, I'll probably redo this introduction in our next meeting so you guys can meet her in person. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
That's great, thank you. Okay, so next up is approval of prior meeting minutes. At the last meeting, was just seeing that there were some deeper edits that I thought we needed to make than we've had at previous meetings. And part of it was the meetings were a little more complicated, so the minutes were a little more complicated. So I took it back with my technical advisor, MacLeod, and Scott Cameron, just to try to take that moment as a way to think about minutes and see if we're doing them as we should. I asked MacLeod to take a crack at drafting them. Basically, what we found that I think would be great going forward is the discussion around the topics doesn't, if you go and look at the Open Meetings Act, we have to capture what the essence of what it was, what the motion was, what the vote was. But there's more included in the drafts that we were looking at than is needed for Open Meetings Act. And then we're also in this modern era where all our meetings are being captured and provided by archive on YouTube. So if you want to go and get more depth on the discussion that happened, that's available to you. So there were a couple new versions of those that are MacLeod's edits to the versions that we had before, and basically it's just a streamlining of the discussion that's there. So I don't know if you've had a chance to look at that yet, but that's the changes that got made. And then I know our Melissa Byers, who's been providing our minutes for us, is looking for us to provide her direction for going forward. So what I'm hoping is that the draft that's out there now, if we can get that right, that becomes a good template, and then deeper appreciation for the work she's doing, because you really, when you dig into it, you see there is kind of an art of how much discussion to put into the minutes so that you understand the motion that was made and the vote that was taken. But having said that, there's also YouTube, so you could go rewatch the discussion if you really are interested in that. So anyway, trying to make sure we do what we're required to do by law with Open Meetings Act and creating minutes for these meetings, but also recognizing that technology has made these meetings more transparent than they were when the law was written. So anyway, with that preamble, what's before us really is approval of meeting minutes for November 16th, November 2nd, and October 19th. So let's start with the 16th. So we have a draft of minutes for the 16th in board effect. Does anyone have any changes they want to see made to those minutes?
No, I think I'm looking at the most recent version, and I didn't have any suggested changes for the November 16th.
I don't think I did either. There was one where I corrected my last name in the revised version. I did look at the revised version. I don't believe it was this one. Mr. Chair, I don't know if you would like to just talk about the way the meetings are structured now, or maybe after we do the vote. But I did have some comments just about the way the minutes are being drafted.
Well, yeah, let's go ahead and have that discussion now in case it does affect our vote. But that's kind of, action-packed agenda item. We're trying to multitask here, approve the minutes plus provide guidance for what we like to see going forward. So,
okay.
Take it away.
Okay. Thank you. So I appreciate this effort to include the discussion. I think this approach is appropriate for many types of committees and commissions, especially those that do not have orders that they vote out. One thing that I would add to the explanation from earlier is that people can look at the minutes, they can look at YouTube, but the reason for the decision is in a commission order that has been voted out. And additional reasons that a commissioner may have for not voting for the order may be provided through a concurrence or rather a dissent or a concurrence of the commissioners voting for the order, but has a different justification. And so I wanted to mention that in case we want to take that into account, because I did, at least from, when we saw the meetings the last time, I observed a pattern, or at least I thought I did, which was that the items that had consensus were very bare bones and, just did what we had to do to meet the requirements of OMA, and the items that did not have consensus, that were voted out 2-1, had additional discussion. I did think that was appropriate because then the order does not necessarily reflect all of the opinions. And so I'm a little concerned that the more discussion we start to add in the minutes, but might not necessarily reflect the entire reasons for voting for an order like an order does.
Yeah, that's well said. In fact, that's exactly what I was discovering as we were going through this process of trying to find it. Because, yeah, I found one instance where the motion said make the changes we just discussed, but then we didn't have any discussion in the minutes, right? So, on the other hand, we had a lot of discussion in the minutes that were, I would say, exploration of options, but not necessarily the reasons we voted. So, again, that's one of the challenges, I think, in drafting good minutes. So anyway, thank you for your comments. I agree. Okay, so then with that context in mind, I guess the question in front of us is, are we ready to adopt the minutes that are in board effect for, let's start with the November 16th meeting.
Aside from my general comment that I just made, I didn't have any edits to any of the minutes except for correcting my last name in one of them. And unfortunately, I can't remember exactly which draft it was, but I can take a quick look at that.
All right. Yeah. So I guess then I'll just take that discussion item plus my observations and go ahead that we move to adopt the minutes for November 16th regular meeting, November 2nd regular meeting, and October 19th regular meeting. And we'll be adopting the versions that are in board effect. So that's the motion. And then I'm assuming that your edit is in board effect. So we can ask Lori Ann just to double check that before she publishes.
That's correct. Thank you. I will second the motion.
Mr. Cameron.
Commissioner Ellison. You're on mute, but I think I read your lips.
Sorry, that would help. Aye.
Commissioner Aguilera,
Aye.
Commissioner O'Connell.
Aye.
The motion passes unanimously, Mr. Chair.
Well, and just as an aside, I think that anybody who's attempted to make minutes out of these meetings has looked at the YouTube transcript feature. So being on mute when you vote doesn't help there. And then the other, which I just thought was funny, is both people who attempted minutes, we were talking about a railroad sighting, and YouTube spelled that SIGHTING. So that was fun too. So anyway, that's just modern world we're in, I guess. But okay, so thank you. We'll move on to next item on the agenda, which is approval of the consent action. Just reminder that it is what is posted on the agenda minus utility matter item 2. So any discussion on the consent action agenda?
None from me.
Okay, so seeing none, I will move that we adopt the proposed orders on the consent action agenda.
And I second.
Mr. Cameron?
Commissioner Aguilera,
Aye.
Commissioner Ellison,
Aye.
Commissioner O'Connell.
Aye.
That motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. So next up is a regular action item, transportation matter, case 23-0054 TREN. So I see Katie online here. Are you going to handle presentation this morning?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, great. So the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Docket number 23-00354 TREN comes before the Commission on staff's petition. Commission staff is currently undergoing investigations in order to ensure that motor carriers are compliant with not only New Mexico statutes, but also Commission rules. Specifically in this docket, so that they're ensuring that motor carriers are filing their annual reports as required by both statute and Commission rules. This is the first docket number of a series of docket numbers. I think we are up to maybe 7 right now, but we are going to start with this first one. We have a list of motor carriers who have not filed their annual reports from varying years, starting from 2013 till current. The staff petition is requesting that the Commission issue an order to show cause that will be followed by a notice period. And during that notice period, staff will work with motor carriers to bring them into compliance. If after the end of the notice period, the matter will be referred to a hearing officer, and typically what happens is at the hearing, staff will present a list of motor carriers who have so far come into compliance since the order, and a list of motor carriers who are still not compliant. At that time, their warrants of authority will be suspended. There is an alternate order also available. That order is to, instead of a order to show cause, it'll issue a notice of intent to suspend and an order to come into compliance. It's more of a notification to the motor carriers that they are non-compliant, and in order to help them come into compliance, rather than take it directly, not directly, but it's a few steps removed from going to a hearing complete, less quicker than the first option. That is the gist of the matter.
Great, thank you. So just to summarize what I heard is we've got a number of carriers that haven't completed all their paperwork, I guess, for lack of a better description. And then we've got orders of different options of process that should go forward. And frankly, there's quite a few of them. So I think that's kind of part of the consideration here is how to handle the volume of it. Is that correct?
That is correct. I am told that there could be around 1,700 motor carriers that are currently being investigated.
And then could you just walk us through the two different orders that are in there in terms of steps and kind of timeline?
Sure. So the first, what the staff has requested is a notice to, an order to show cause, which will be submitted or sent to each motor carrier on the list. And it will be an order asking them to explain why. Technically, it's an order that will ask them to explain why they should not be fined or found in non-compliance with the rules. What happens after that is there will be a notice period where the staff will work with the carriers on the list in order to help them come into compliance for them to submit the necessary paperwork, the annual reports. And after that, staff will make compile a list of compliant motor carriers, and then another list of motor carriers that have not responded to the order. At that point, there will be a hearing in front of the hearing officer. We refer to a hearing officer, and at that hearing, staff will present those who are compliant and another list of those who are non-compliant. And at that point, non-compliant motor carriers, their warrants will be suspended at that hearing. The other option is to issue it's kind of a notice of intent to suspend and an order to come into compliance. So it's not so, it's maybe like 2 steps removed from being completely sent to a hearing at the get-go. This notice would put the motor carriers on notice that they are not in compliance, that they should submit their paperwork. They'll be ordered to come into compliance and work with the staff to ensure that they are in compliance with the rules and the statutes. At that point, from there onwards, the staff would have to do the same steps. They would compile a list of compliant people who actually responded are now compliant, and then motor carriers who have not responded and are non-compliant. And at that point, it may be referred to a hearing in front of a hearing officer. So those are the gist of the steps.
Great, thank you. Commissioners, you got any further questions or discussion?
I do. So I suggested the second approach, which is to issue a notice of intent and order to come into compliance. The approach presented in the petition, which is to issue a show cause order, I believe that the approach is legally supportable, but I think it gets too far ahead given the circumstances. So the proposed approach in the petition, the show cause order, asks the commission to do 2 things. First, to find probable cause that respondents have violated the Motor Carriers Act by not filing their annual reports. And second, to explain why they should not be penalized. However, the petition and proposed order do not address how the motor carriers should come into compliance, and they don't offer a path to come into compliance. And that's what I believe is the primary goal here, is to get the motor carriers to come into compliance. So, and as advisory staff just informed us, there may be about 1,700 motor carriers out of compliance, and some of these date back to 2015 or earlier. With so many motor carriers failing to file their annual reports dating back years, I think we need to recognize that we have not, as an agency, done a good job of enforcing compliance with our requirements. And in addition, there is no indication in the petition that staff has attempted to reach out and contact the respondents to help the respondents achieve compliance with their annual reports. If staff's petition had explained a process for attempting to reach out to the motor carriers, or sought to achieve compliance, then I would be more supportive of issuing a show cause order, because then it would show that the motor carriers are just not responding and not attempting to come into compliance. However, that's not the case. Based on my reading of the petition, there's no indication of prior efforts. And so I think that this order would come as a surprise, and that it is not fair to threaten to penalize or threaten to revoke the warrant of authority under these circumstances. So I offered the second approach because I believe that before we issue an order to show cause, we should offer some flexibility and support to help the motor carriers come into compliance.
Yeah, I think I agree with you, just based on looking at the volume of motor carriers we're talking about, and the fact that we need these motor carriers to provide the service they're providing. Commissioner Ellison, did you have anything on this one?
I did have a couple of questions for Ms. Lang. Are these motor carriers aware that they are not in compliance with these annual report filing requirements?
I have discussed in general terms of the process that the list that, how the staff came up with the list. And I am informed that they have been in contact with some of them or most of them, but a lot of times their contact information does not seem to be current. So there are some carriers who the email bounced back, or we got return mail, things like that. So the short answer is yes, but I think there are also a number of carriers who are not aware because we don't have current contact information for them.
And what is the proper remedy if they are several years in arrears? Would they need to file an annual report for all the years that they have failed to file?
I think the requirement of annual reports, what years they should file, is I think in the commission's discretion. If we just want them to file the most current year, which would be for 2022, that is in fact what is in the alternate order, I believe. So yes, it would be for the most recent required year if the commission so wishes.
And is any sort of penalty contemplated here in these orders that we're considering now, or is that an open question?
It's an open question. The first option informs them that per statute, the commission could or may assess fines not more than $10,000 per violation, but it's more of a notice than it'll happen. So it's at the commission's discretion.
Okay. Well, based on what I've heard, I'm in favor of what Commissioner Aguilera is suggesting here, that to sort of, haul them in for lack of compliance when, not everyone, may be aware of it, seems, a little extreme. So I would favor Commissioner Aguilera's order on this.
Yeah,
So
so I was gonna say I was gonna invite Commissioner Aguilera to move his order.
Okay, thank you. And just to clarify, the order would allow 60 days for the motor carriers to come into compliance, and then some time for staff to evaluate that and let us know if they're attempting to comply or not. I will note there have been some motor carriers that have responded that saw this petition from staff, and so they've filed to an attempt to comply. Those motor carriers are still on this order. However, this order gives them an opportunity to demonstrate that they've come into compliance. And the reason they're still on here is because staff has not had an opportunity to definitively say whether they do comply or not. And so with that said, I move to adopt the order that is titled Notice of Intent to Suspend Warrants of Authority in order to come into compliance.
I second.
Commissioner O'Connell,
Aye.
Commissioner Aguilera,
Aye.
Commissioner Ellison.
Aye.
The motion passes unanimously.
Thank you, and thank you, Counselor.
Thank you.
Next up, we have two items from the reigning employee of the month. We'll start with case number 23-00353. So, Mr. Lundin, you have the floor.
Good morning, commissioners. Can you hear me well?
Yes, we can.
So case number 23-00353, this is P&M's latest application for approval of several new generating resources, a PPA, a few ESAs, and one CCN. I brought this case before you 2 weeks ago for you to contemplate setting certain deadlines in the matter for the commission's review. The order that was passed 2 weeks ago asked P&M for further clarification on a couple items. P&M's response, they stated that P&M does indeed waive Rule 551 and that they do indeed request expedited treatment on the CCN application. So for today, for your consideration, I prepared 3 orders. They are approximately the same as the orders that you saw 2 weeks ago. Option one was the one that changed the most from the last time that you saw it, but option one would find that May 31st would be a self-imposed deadline for the commission to act on P&M's request for approvals of the PPA and ESAs. And then it would impose or just affirm the statutory deadline for review of the CCN. So that would be, I believe, July 25th, which is extendable with 6 months. Option two would stick with Rule 551 and the CCN statute, thereby implementing a commission review deadline of April 26th, 2024 for the PPA and ESAs, and the same July date for the CCN, which is extendable. Option three would find that with Rule 551 waived, the CCN deadline controls through the entire application, therefore setting that same July date, which is extendable by 6 months, as the commission's deadline for final action on the whole application. And additionally, Commissioner Aguilera provided some edits to the option three kind of baseline draft, which would in essence give you a fourth option, and that would find that Rule 551 was waived it would set the July deadline for the CCN part of the application, but it would not expressly set a deadline for the PPA and ESA portion of the application. However, it would direct the hearing examiner to issue a procedural schedule that would allow the commission to enter a final action by May 1st, and that if extra time is needed, the hearing examiner could extend that to May 31st. So it's a nuanced change, but it is kind of counts as a separate option. Since this is a matter that we've already discussed over the last few weeks, I don't think I need to provide much more explanation, but I do stand for questioning if you have any. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. I guess I'm just sitting here feeling like we should give the hearing examiner latitude to manage this case. We had a discussion 2 weeks ago about whether it's better to consider the PPA, ESAs, and then the CCN side by side or separately. I've got no opinion on that, but I'm not in the details of managing the case. So I guess I am leaning towards giving the hearing examiner the latitude. And then having said that, I think that matches, I don't know which option number it was, but the version of the order where the deadline is the CCN deadline of July 25th, with good cause could extend for 6 months to January 24th. And then there's a paragraph C that says that procedural schedule will endeavor to meet PNM's request. So May 1st, and then for good cause can extend this deadline by May 31st. So to me, that gives the hearing examiner latitude, yet also guidance. So that's kind of having thought about our discussion 2 weeks ago and seeing that PNM has acknowledged they waived the deadline on the PPA ESA application. That feels to me to be the right spot to land. So that's just my opinion, and happy to hear the discussion.
Thank you, Commissioner. And just for your info, that would be the option 3 that was amended by Commissioner Aguilera.
Okay.
Well, I wanted to comment on this as well. When I look at PNM's response, I do not read that they intended an unconditional waiver of our 6-month rule on PPAs. I read that they would be fine with a May 1st approval. So essentially granting us another 7 days. I do understand they say they waived it, but at the same time, they're requesting approval by May 1st of the PPAs, which, to me is a conditional waiver. An extra week, obviously doesn't help us that much. And my preference would be to say, since we've got the 6-month rule, that we stick with that rule until we change it, and then having the statutory deadline for the proposed company-owned project, I think is reasonable, because I think that project deserves additional scrutiny. Obviously, the ESAs and the PPAs would be a pass-through for the company. However, they would earn a rate of return on the company-owned asset. And the law allows us that amount of time for scrutiny. And, I do think they could have filed this as two separate cases, with the company-owned asset as one and the PPAs, ESAs as the other. And, we wouldn't be having this discussion now. So, my preference would be to adopt option 2, because I think it's cleaner and we'd be adhering to our own rule.
Thank you. I'll go next. I agree with your reading, Commissioner Ellison, of the waiver. However, I don't agree that PNM has the ability to conditionally waive a deadline. The question to them was whether they're waiving it or not. And they came back and said, we waive it to the extent you do this and that. And I don't think that is a position that they should be able or are able to put the commission in. So I think that they have waived it. At the same time, I do believe that we should make every effort to meet the requested timeframe, just like we would with any other case. I think that's a good, a good practice. There may be times where something slips out of necessity because staff might be overworked. There are other priorities, but I think that we make every effort to accommodate the requested schedule. I guess I do see all of these as viable options, some more than others. The other one that we did not discuss is whether we even need to issue an order here. I don't think that we do, because there is no deadline yet. I think what we have right now is a clarification from PNM that they are waiving their deadline and they would like for us to issue an order by May 1. And I think that's all it is. I don't know that we need to respond in an order. I think that we can, if we want to give the hearing examiner guidance on what to do by when. But I think we can, just ask the hearing examiner here as well. Please try to get us an order so that we have sufficient time to issue an order by May 1. If you need more time, then let us know. So just to complicate it further, there's a fifth option for you, is do nothing at the moment. Like I said, I could see a couple of these. I could see option 2 being viable. The one that I put forward being viable, and also doing nothing being viable. I'll stop now to see what other discussion we may have.
Yeah, I agree with what you said, Commissioner Aguilera, that PNM has the right to waive the deadline. They don't have the right to set the deadline. That's something that's within our responsibilities. So having said that, I think it's worth it for us to rule just to reinforce that. So that's my argument against the do nothing. And then again, going back to 2 weeks ago, this whole situation was created by PNM. So don't want to reward questionable behavior by them. So that's part of why I would prefer to act. Listening to the discussion, I think the tweak would be, again, I'd like to give the hearing examiner latitude to do what needs to be done to do, as Commissioner Ellison suggests, make sure this is heard correctly and well. I still believe the biggest issue is just the need for the resources, whether they're CCN or PPAs or not. You can't if you separate those two, I think trying to examine that question gets hard and confusing. So I would expect that, and that's the one thing I would think P&M did well here, is put them together, recognizing that there's one system and one need. So is this portfolio of resources, whether they're PPAs or CNNs, the right portfolio is the best way to look at it. So having said that, then I'm still on what's been described as option 4. So CCN deadline, endeavor for May 1st. The one tweak might be just leave it open for Mr. Mueller to come back if he wants guidance on anything after May 1st.
Chair or Mr. Lundeen, can you please clarify again which is the option? I may have gotten confused with the dates that were stated. Which one is option 4?
It is your amendments to option 3.
Okay. Well, I'm obviously okay with that one.
And just for clarity, that would be the one calling for final action by July 25th on everything, and then with good cause to extend to January 24th, 2025, yet endeavoring to decide by May 1st of next year. Is that correct?
And with the additional detail that the hearing examiner could extend from May 1st to May 31st, if needed.
So that detail would just give Mr. Mueller comfort that he can do anything between May 1st and May 31st without needing to check in with us. But if he wants to go beyond May 31st, he can choose to check in with us. I guess I'm not clear what guidance we're providing with that May 31st detail.
Mr. Lundeen, I'm happy to answer that. So I think it's what I think it's the idea that I was explaining, that the deadline has been waived, but we will endeavor to do it on time. And by on time, I mean the requested deadline. And so, and recognizing that we might have other things that get in the way. And so really the guidance to the hearing examiner is give us enough time so that we could accommodate this requested timeline. Should something come up that just really won't allow for that, then you could let us know. I think informally, I don't think there has to be a formal request, just that they require more time and intend to complete the hearing and have a recommended decision in time for us to rule by May 31. May 31 is a deadline that we're coming up with based on a preliminary evaluation of what is stated in the PPAs, ESAs that P&M has proposed.
Okay, I appreciate the background on that detail. Again, rankles a bit because that's a deadline P&M created. But anyway, so I guess I'll go ahead and move adoption of that order that we've been referring to as option 4.
I second.
Commissioner Ellison?
Is there any further discussion?
Oh, sorry.
I mean, we've had a big discussion here. I just want to make sure before we vote, if anybody wants to say something, get a chance.
Yeah,
I'll just, yeah, I'm sorry. I'll just reiterate, of course, we've got to do a good job on evaluating these. I don't see any reason why we can't do a good job and still stick with our own rule, which would come up with the April 26th deadline for the PPAs and the ESA. I think we should stick with our own rule until we change it. I would be happy to review a change, because it does seem a bit odd to me that you can have an arbitrarily large number of PPAs in one application, and the commission has got the same deadline, but I think we should stick with it until we change it. So that's why I'm in favor of option 2.
Yes,
Appreciate that. I guess I'm still coming from my background with resource planning, is it's a portfolio that solves the problem, and whether that portfolio has one element to it or 8, it's still, that's the question. And then another point I wanted to make is, even though we're putting maybe deadlines in these orders, that PNM's obligation to create a reliable system exists whether they ask us for approval of anything or not. So this whole concept that it's on the commission to approve these by a certain date for PNM's reliability does not relieve PNM of their legal obligation to produce a reliable system.
yes, I'll add that I do believe there is room for improvement in our rules that recognize this, that recognize both what the chairman just explained, that, you know, it may be better to do this holistically and think about it, you know, similar to what we were talking about recently with distribution planning. But I do think that our rules could recognize that when a CCN is combined with a PPA, that we would extend the PPA deadline. That's the CCN deadline is in statute. We cannot do anything about that, but the PPA deadline is in our rules, and so we could open an inquiry and, you know, receive stakeholder input and potentially change that. And I would support that narrow change. And so the last thing that I'll say before we vote on the motion is that I intend to vote to approve it, for the reason that the chairman explained, that we're, you know, trying to explain our message here. However, normally I would prefer not to issue an order right now. I think what we have here is a filing and a clarification. And so we have time, you know, to figure out what the final order would say without issuing this interim order.
And then I guess I got one lingering question before we vote is, I don't see the fact that the applicant has waived the deadline as us not following our rules. So applicant waived the deadline. We're in control of deadlines, and I think this order is in harmony with that. So are you seeing that somehow differently, Commissioner Ellison?
Well, I mean, you know, I certainly acknowledge they have waived the deadline, but I think their intent was a conditional waiver. And, you know, I felt that it was really an attempt to negotiate with us over these deadlines. And, you know, I would prefer not to negotiate over the deadlines. And I think it's just more clear and straightforward to say, we're going to go with what's already in the books for our rule and what's already in the statute.
Oh, yeah, thank you for that. That helps me understand it. I don't believe the applicant should be negotiating with us on deadlines. So that's why I wanted to put the deadline setting in the hands of the hearing examiner, because that will happen with all the parties to the case involved. We're the judges here. We're not going to hear this case. We've given it to the hearing examiner. There may be other parties that have other issues with the deadline that P&M has waived. So I don't view it as applicant negotiating with the commission. So that's why I'm okay with giving the hearing examiner latitude to do what hearing examiner needs to do on this case. Okay, so I guess any further discussion before we vote? If not, I'll turn it over to Mr. Cameron to call the roll.
Commissioner Ellison,
No.
Commissioner Aguilera,
Aye.
Commissioner O'Connell.
Aye.
The vote is 2-1. The motion passes, Mr. Chair. You're on mute, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Next is also Mr. Lundeen. It's Southwest Public Service Company's annual 2024 Renewable Energy Portfolio Procurement Plan, case 23-00230.
Thank you, Chairman. I will nominate Alejandro Reddick-Martinez to take my spot.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'll be presenting this case on behalf of OGC this morning. This matter concerns SPS's 2024 Renewable Energy Act Plan and associated riders. The requests in the docket are unopposed, and the hearing examiner recommended that the Commission approve each of SPS's requests. What's before the Commission today is a proposed final order that approves SPS's requests by adopting the recommended decision. And unless the Commission has any initial questions, what I was going to do is give a general summary of SPS's submissions and requests and the bases for the approval of those submissions. Okay. So generally there are two categories of items in this docket. The first category is reports and plans, and the second are riders for RPS cost recovery. On the reports and plans, things were pretty straightforward. SPS filed a 2022 RPS report for a backwards-looking report, a 2024 RPS plan, and a 2025 next year plan. Generally, these reports and plans satisfy the requirements of the statute, relevant rules, and prior Commission orders, and should be approved for that reason. As for the riders, there are three different riders at issue in this docket. The first is the 2024 RPS cost rider. The second is the 2024 Solar Connect Community Rate Rider, which relates to a voluntary renewable program under the RIA. And the third is the RPS Reconciliation Rider. So the first two of these riders, the RPS Cost Rider and the Solar Connect Community Rate Rider, should be adopted because they satisfy the requirements of the statute. In other words, there's no question that they recover RPS compliance costs. They also are in line with prior Commission orders. They should be adopted and approved for those reasons. As for the third rider, the reconciliation rider, SPS is actually requesting to terminate this rider, and that's appropriate as well. Little context for that rider. It was approved by the Commission in a prior case. The original goal of that rider was to recover or credit customers for over or under collected RPS costs. And there was a little complicating factor following the elimination of the large customer cap from a prior amendment of the RIA. As things stand now, the rider has a very small bill impact, and the large customer cap is no longer present in the RIA, so there's not a justification for treating those customers, those ratepayers differently. What SPS has proposed doing is eliminating the reconciliation rider and handling over or under recovery of RPS compliance costs through the 2025 RPS rider. So rather than having a separate reconciliation rider, they're going to roll over under collection of these costs into the rider for the following year. There's no legal issue here, as this method of cost recovery is also consistent with the statute. So for those reasons, I recommend that the commission adopt the proposed final order, and I'm happy to answer any questions that the commission has.
Yeah, thank you for that presentation. Commissioners, do you have any questions or discussion on this item?
Just to clarify, SPS is not proposing any additional resources in this plan year application. Is that correct?
That's correct. There are no new resources proposed in this plan.
And based on my reading for the next year plan 2025, SPS is projecting insufficient renewable generation to meet the 40% RPS number, and they will need to draw on their banked RECs to meet that 40% requirement.
I'm not familiar with those exact figures, but if the proposal is to draw on banked RECs, there's a significant bank of RECs. I think in their backwards looking RPS report for the 2022 plan year, I believe they reported something like 3.5 million banked RECs.
Right. I just wanted to point out that for the next plan year 2025, that they would need to withdraw. They are projecting that they would need to withdraw about 1.2 million RECs to satisfy that 40% RPS requirement. And I guess another thing that I thought was striking about this application, if you look at their 2022 renewable energy compliance report, their New Mexico retail sales were about 9 million megawatt hours. They're projecting 11 million in 2024 and 12.35 million in 2025. So, the rate of growth is astounding for SPS. I also saw that their RPS percentage in 2022 would be 32.6%, based on, if you compare their generation to their net retail sales. So obviously they exceeded what was required of them in 2022.
Thank you for that. Thank you for the presentation, and to the hearing examiner for their decision. I do not have any further discussion.
Yeah, I also thanks for the presentation and discussion, and I will move that we adopt the proposed final order in this case.
I second.
Mr. Cameron?
Commissioner Ellison,
Aye.
Commissioner Aguilar,
Aye.
Commissioner O'Connell.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you, commissioners.
Okay, so going back to the change we made to the agenda, we're now going to pick up a case that was originally on the consent action agenda. It's utility case number 23-00154 UT. So Mr. Fisk, I believe you're presenting that.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, that's correct.
Great, thank you. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This concerns two motions that were filed. One by Sacred Wind Communications and one by OSO Internet Solutions. These motions were filed prior to the commission's decisions with regard to the disposition of applications for broadband program support. There was the order denying, granting applications and denying other applications without prejudice. And as a result of that, first I'll discuss the OIS motion, the OSO Internet Solutions motion. I recommend that it be denied as entirely moot because the projects that OIS was concerned about, possibly overlapping with its current territory, were not awarded. We were not funded. So it's a non-issue. Staff pointed that out in staff's response to OIS's motion as well. The commission denied the Smith Bagley and Continental Divide project applications for other reasons. And so the motion, as I noted, is moot. Turning to the Sacred Wind motion, Sacred Wind makes similar claims of potential overlap. Sacred Wind wasn't certain that there was overlap in terms of whether Sacred Wind could be considered to serve the territories at issue in the motion, such that they can't be considered areas unserved by broadband or areas underserved by broadband. They did not provide information that was sufficient to counter what was in the applications of Smith Bagley, whose project awards Sacred Wind is challenging. In Smith Bagley's applications, Smith Bagley was required, as all applicants are according to the under our rule, to verify and affirm that the areas for which they seek funding are either areas unserved by broadband as defined in our rule, or areas underserved by broadband as required by our rule. So they've affirmed that. In Sacred Wind's motion, Sacred Wind admits that they're not certain that Smith Bagley has violated these provisions. Staff in its response would deny Sacred Wind's motion on that basis, that Sacred Wind hasn't met its burden, and also that with regard to three of the Smith Bagley projects that Sacred Wind objects to or is concerned about, three of them were not granted by the commission, so those are mooted. There were four that actually were granted funding, but staff's position is that those projects, again, Sacred Wind hasn't shown that there's an actual problem, in terms of those areas being unserved or underserved. So the order that I've drafted, which includes Commissioner Aguilera's revisions, would note that, and would also note that these two companies provide two different kinds of service. Smith Bagley provides mobile service, wireless service, with radio towers, and Sacred Wind provides fiber to the home. And so these, under our definitions of areas unserved by broadband and areas underserved by broadband, the definitions define those areas as lacking, to whatever extent the speeds provided by both types of service. So since Smith Bagley is providing a different type of service than wireless versus fiber to the home, then under our definition they wouldn't be, even if Sacred Wind served a certain percentage at a certain speed with their fiber to the home systems, there would still be it would still be allowable under our rules to let Smith Bagley serve the area with a different technology, mobile wireless or fixed wireless, excuse me. And with that, I will take any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Fisk. I guess my question is just about the timing of this. That feels like these petitions should have been figured out before we voted. So am I missing something there?
Commissioner, Mr. Chairman, our rule allows these motions to be filed before before a dispositive order is issued by the commission with regard to all applications. And they can also be filed right up after that. And usually in the past, people have carriers challenging an award have filed after they waited to see if the motion would be moot by virtue of the commission's dispositive order. In terms of these challenges, I would say, actually, I think it makes sense to have the order first, because there's not, with regard to OIS, there's no OSO internet. That motion is completely moot, and we know that now because of, due to the fact that a dispositive order has been issued, and we also know that three of the projects to which Sacred Wind objected also will moot point. So the commission doesn't have to, staff doesn't have to investigate those particular projects, and it reduces the burden of ruling upon these motions. So I think it makes sense actually to wait until after the order, but I may be missing something. I'd certainly be more than willing to hear why it might be better to hear such motions before a dispositive order is issued.
I was just imagining a case where one of these motions had substance and merit to it, and then we have approved a project, and then the staff didn't bother investigating until after we'd approved the project. He just feels big picture backwards to me.
I understand that, Commissioner O'Connell. We could consider amending the rule to require these motions to be filed before, I think it's the October 15th deadline for the commission to issue a dispositive order. We could do that in a rulemaking.
Yeah, I guess the other side of it is what happens if this thing I imagine came true. Do we revote? Do we disapprove something we've already approved? I mean, what's going on here?
Well, we do call these in the rule, we call them motions for reconsideration. So the idea is, that awards that are made in the dispositive order, might be challenged. And if it's determined that something in the application, I mean, usually these motions are about what the two motions are about here, which is potential overlap. Those are the only ones that I think all the motions have been like that. So if someone is able to show after the fact that, say for instance, Sacred Wind actually was able to demonstrate that the service they provide was that they provide, both types of service, or they provide one type of service, they provide fixed, I'm sorry, fiber to the home, and another company is already providing fixed wireless and up to the speeds that are indicated in our rules and to the percentages of penetration into the market as per our rules. Then if they're able to, essentially prove that the application was incorrect, whether intentionally, whether, negligently or fraudulently, then I think that would, it wouldn't be in any way objectionable for the commission to say, oh, we shouldn't have awarded this. Your application said, and it was affirmed and signed with an affirmation of verification, said that these areas were unserved and underserved, and it looked like that was true. But, you should have been, the applicant should have been more careful about that, because we are convinced now by the motion that that's not true.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, did you have any other discussion or questions on this item?
I do. I guess I want to clarify that what we're dealing with here is not a motion for reconsideration. Can you confirm, Mr. Fisk?
Yes, Commissioner, it certainly is not a motion for reconsideration in terms of, it didn't come after the order that would be reconsidered. Our rule does use the word motion for reconsideration, the term, and it's not invoking the section of the Public Utility Act that has specific deadlines, et cetera. But the idea is that another carrier, or it doesn't even have to be another carrier, it could be a town or a political subdivision, points something out to the commission and says, you didn't have this information, and so looking at
sorry to interject. I wanted to make a point, because you mentioned about potentially changing our rules, but I'm failing to see where we would need to make a change. In looking at the rules, we have to open the docket on May 1. By September 1, the Telecom Bureau needs to provide a presentation. And then we need to make a decision by October 15. And by November 1, any person may file a request for reconsideration. And then we need to dispose of any motions for reconsideration by December 1. That process makes sense to me, because it's like any other order. We issue a decision and then there's an opportunity to seek rehearing or reconsideration. But I think what the equivalent of this motion is in a, another context, is a protest. And so I agree with the chairman that this should have been a consideration in us making a decision by October 15. Because I don't think, this was filed before we made a decision, right? So they couldn't, the applicants could not have known, in fact, did not know which projects would be awarded. And so I want to clarify that, because for two reasons. One, to state my preference to also incorporate and consider these, what I seem to think is a protest or at least a comment in our final decision that needs to be issued by October 15. And second, to explain that I don't believe we need to change anything in our rule to accommodate that. I do have one other issue that I would like to discuss, but I'll pause there in case there's more discussion on this particular issue. Okay. So I'll move to the second one, which is that I added more detail into the draft that, as Mr. Fisk explained. This is one situation, because I believe that we need to explain our reasoning. This is one situation where maybe we're explaining too much. And right, because I do agree with staff that Sacred Wind has not provided any specific or actionable grounds. And so I do think that we could, and given the speculation on Sacred Wind's part that Mr. Fisk described earlier. And so I do believe that we can issue a shorter version of this. And so my question for you is whether you are comfortable with the additional language that I think is accurate, but perhaps goes above and beyond what we need to include in this instance.
Were you asking me if I'm comfortable with the language?
I was asked, well, I think I think we talked about it via email, and I think you said you were.
Yes.
But I was asking the other commissioners.
Great.
Yeah, no, I appreciated the extra detail in this case.
Yeah, I guess I've only seen one version. I think it's the more recent version, and I didn't have an issue with it.
Okay.
And so I guess I wanted to ask Mr. Fisk, is Sacred Wind alleging that Smith Bagley mischaracterized these areas as unserved or underserved?
No, Smith Bagley doesn't go that far, because Smith Bagley admits that they don't have, they don't assert that they're providing the service to that extent. They assert that they serve these areas, but they also, as staff pointed out, indicate that they're not certain of the degree of overlap. And so just the fact that there's some overlap in the territory that Sacred Wind currently serves and the projects to which it objects, the Smith Bagley projects, that's not sufficient. I mean, this really does depend on whether the project area meets one of those two definitions. So, and Sacred Wind doesn't admits they don't they should be able to provide the information as to whether they're serving the area, to what extent, and they don't even assert that they are. They indicate that they don't have a clear. They aren't able to make those accusations because they don't have sufficient information, which they should, about their own service.
I see. So it sounds like there's really no dispute about the fact that these areas that were awarded are underserved. So it sounds more like Sacred Wind is saying, we'd rather not have the competition. We haven't been able to build out as fast as we'd like, and we'd rather not have the competition. Is that a fair assessment?
Well, that could be, that could be, a motivation. I think, really they didn't, Sacred Wind didn't file a motion that, sticks to the rule. That they simply object to the fact that, oh, we serve some of this area, and we're not sure if there's also other overlap, but they don't even go into the extent to which they serve it, and how they would, or demonstrate, hey, this area is already served. It doesn't meet either definition. They don't try to meet that burden.
And, I have to say, I've had the same reaction as Chair O'Connell on this, that, it would have been nice to know ahead of the vote that, there was this, there was this objection. Maybe I missed the memo on that one, but, it wouldn't have changed my decision on it, because I think we did the right thing. I don't think Sacred Wind has sufficient justification here, but I would have liked to at least been made aware of the fact that, there is a protest, and I'm not sure if that's just, setting expectations around communication, or, some formal change in how things are done.
Well, Commissioner, I apologize for that. It's the way that we've handled these in the past is as motions for reconsideration. And the reason we've done that is because most projects are denied. The vast majority of projects are denied for other reasons. So it does allow the commission, to avoid deciding, some motions are mooted. And that's how we approached it in the past. We certainly could change the approach to one in which we consider protests that are filed before the issuance of a dispositive order, and include that input in the decision for that the dispositive order represents.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and obviously this is the first time I've seen this kind of an issue, so I thought it was worth having a discussion about. So I appreciate us having that.
Yeah, I want to thank you, Commissioner Ellison. I was on the fence about moving that one to regular, so you just confirmed that it was worth doing, and I think this discussion proved that out. So, having said that, I'll move that we adopt a potential order that's in board effect on this case.
I second.
Mr. Campbell?
Sorry, which commissioner were you asking for? Two people.
Commissioner Aguilera.
Oh, aye.
Commissioner Ellison.
Aye.
Commissioner O'Connell.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. And thank you for that, Mr. Fisk. Definitely learned something, and I'll think about it. And might be, I agree with Commissioner Aguilera, we probably don't need a rule change, but might be worth it to figure out how to change the presentation we get next year. So then next case on the agenda is again yours, Mr. Fisk. It's 220-00104 UT. It's the remand of the El Paso rate case.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. We have proposed orders by each of the commissioners. I'm going to start with the order proposed by Commissioner Aguilera because it's most similar to the order that I had proposed previously. Because
Can I just clarify that I'm not trying to take ownership of this. This is as a result of the comment I made at the last meeting, which was just to bolster our discussion in response to the protest. And so that's,
okay, I'm sorry. Okay, so
just to add to that, the way I look at these is we've got really two lanes. One is an order that matches staff's recommendations, or an order that looks into the idea of retroactive rate making, and then two versions of that. So anyway, that if that helps when you're describing them, and future discussion of which one we're talking about is why I'm offering that tidbit. So sorry to interrupt. Take it away.
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that's true. It's a good summary of what the difference is among these orders. But looking at Commissioner Aguilera's, the one I've labeled Aguilera, because it includes some revisions recommended by Commissioner Aguilera. The rest of the order is my order from the most recent open meeting. It was discussed. It would adopt staff's recommendations, which, as Mr. Chairman, you pointed out, a principal difference between staff's recommendations and what EPE is asking for is that EPE would include amounts for past the adjustments of the revenue requirement dating up to the issuance of mandate. In other words, when the commission did not yet have jurisdiction over the case returned to it, because EPE argues that it can collect those amounts, and staff, and I agree with staff, looking at the case law from the Supreme Court, it seems clear that including those amounts in an adjustment would be considered unlawful retroactive rate making, and that the adjustment for past amounts not collected or under collected would be only proper going forward from the date that the commission received jurisdiction over the matter, again, the issuance of the mandate. And that's why, this order would do that. It and expressly refers to staff's analysis and of the case law, and to, it cites the cases that are at issue, and comes to a conclusion about those amounts, the pre-mandate amounts, as being uncollectible due to that doctrine, that rate making doctrine. Otherwise, the staff was recommended approval of EPE's what EPE called its alternative proposal, which was, instead of waiting until EPE files its next rate case to begin implementing rates that will collect the proper revenue requirement as per the court's decision, that this will start on January 1st. So there won't need to be such a regulatory asset that also includes amounts going forward, because January 1st is when the revenue requirement will be corrected. So only the adjustments for the past would need to be considered for a regulatory asset, if that's if the commission were so inclined to grant an accounting order that would do that. So staff was in agreement that with EPE's alternative proposal, because then there would be prompt correction of the rates to recover the proper revenue requirement going forward. And I discussed staff's position on the adjustment, that it only goes back to the past adjustment would only go back to the issuance of the mandate. I agree with staff. I think that's the proper action to take. And then the rest of EPE's recommendation with regard to the past adjustment and the booking of a regulatory asset, staff accepted in terms of carrying costs, and that regulatory asset would only be for the past amount, coming from the date of the issuance of mandate through January 1st or December 31st, the day before. And would, the staff would does recommend granting that request for that regulatory asset and allowing it to accrue carrying costs, which it would up to the issuance of a final order, the effectiveness of new rates in EPE's next rate case. So there would be regulatory asset in the meantime. And then EPE had proposed that once that adjustment with the carrying costs is incorporated into rates in that next general rate case, that this is a fixed amount, the adjustment would be a fixed amount at that point, be recovered over 3 years. In other words, spread over the approved rates and the rates approved in that next rate case. The adjustment would be spread over those rates for a period of 3 years for recovery. So that's the order that I would that I recommend. But because that was, I think staff's recommendation is correct. But moving on to, and I don't know if commissioners want to discuss their own motions. I was going to move on to Commissioner Ellison's Ellison's proposed order. But if Commissioner Ellison, if you would like to discuss it and skip over my discussion, that's perfectly fine with me.
I'm happy to provide some remarks around why I'm proposing this. I'm not in agreement with what I guess we're calling staff's proposal here. I think that it is improper and unnecessary to label this period that the case was being decided by the court as an inappropriate or unallowable retroactive rate making or an impermissible retroactive rate making. In my view, this is more akin to a reconciliation due to a court order. It's not a wholesale reconsideration of rates, which to me is more like a new determination on ROE or a new determination on cost of service. It's a reconciliation. We do this kind of thing all the time. We've got an SPS energy efficiency case before us where a reconciliation is being requested for amounts over collected, amounts more was collected than was spent in the energy efficiency program. Would it be retroactive rate making to make that adjustment? I don't think so. I think we're probably going to do that. We typically do those kind of things with the San Juan generation station rate credit, the settlement that we approved and the Supreme Court approved. one could argue that's retroactive rate making. And if I'm not mistaken, that argument was made, yet we're approving it and it's going to happen. If you think about decoupling, that's something that we haven't discussed yet. But, what is decoupling but a reconciliation for, volumes that were more or less than expected in a prior period. So, I think that we would really hamstring ourselves and, many of our processes if we say, oh, this, looks like retroactive rate making and we can't do it. I also think it sets a terrible precedent. It's basically saying that for the period that a case is under consideration in the Supreme Court, there can be no remedy. A company has no remedy for that period, because to make any adjustment for that would be, by this argument, retroactive rate making. And it's essentially saying the court doesn't have authority to require a remedy for the period in which the matter is under consideration at the court. So, I think that this proposed order by staff is fraught with consequences that have not been well thought out, and I'm very much opposed to it. I would be okay with either of the two alternate proposals. I would favor the one I've suggested that goes ahead and makes the determination that this is a reconciliation and it's permissible. And, if that's challenged in court, I would welcome that. I think that we would have a positive outcome, and it would strengthen our decision making. At the same time, I can see the argument for wanting to have a more inclusive process that is focused on discussing this issue. So those are some of my thoughts.
I guess since I'm responsible for the other alternate out there, I'll take a shot at this. I put the alternate out there just because if we are gonna entertain looking at the longer period for creation of regulatory asset, this whole concept, in my experience, retroactive rate making is a concept that shows up in lots of cases. So in this instance, all we have is the interveners that are in El Paso's rate case. So I think we would need, first of all, if we're going to make a big change like what's being contemplated here, we would need to have process, especially because we're dealing with a remand in a case where process was at fault. So we need to, if we're going to make any big structural change to what's happened in the past, it shouldn't be done, I think, by fiat in one case. It should be done in an instance where parties have who aren't involved in the narrower case that we're looking at have opportunity to weigh in. So that's why I proposed that other alternate order, which is if we're going to go down this road, we need to have process. So that was the goal of that order. Having said that, I'm in favor of staff's recommendation. And the reason is because I went back and reread the Supreme Court decision from the US West case. So I've heard your examples, Commissioner Ellison, of other instances where you make reconciliations or adjustments based on what happened in the past. The instance that is the most similar to what we're doing now versus, the US West case is exactly what we're doing here. It was a appeal of a rate making decision by the commission. And this term retroactive rate making isn't a term that staff or the parties created. It's the words that the Supreme Court used in that Supreme Court decision. So in terms of how it's being labeled, that comes directly from Supreme Court. Then when I read the decision, it looks to me like it's just pretty clear. It just says that the proper time for this is from the time that the Supreme Court ruled, not from, you don't go backwards in that. That's let's see here, paragraph 52 in the Supreme Court's ruling. Yeah, paragraph 52 is where they talk about how it's retroactive rate making. And then, it's interesting because what it talks about is that, the court has the power to decide, but it is not a rate making body. We are. And so that's why my understanding of it is they're saying we've decided, and then it's your job to set the rates, but the boundary of where you can set the rates is from the point of their decision. So that's why I think staff's order is in harmony with the instructions we've received from the Supreme Court in an instance almost exactly like what we're looking at right now. So I put that other order out there because I just couldn't fathom moving forward without more process than was provided by just making a ruling in this case. But the thing that makes the most sense to me is to adopt the order that adopts staff's recommendation.
I agree with you, Chairman. Commissioner Ellison, I think you've made a lot of reasonable points that are accepted and precedent in many jurisdictions. I think it is a fair way to look at the issue. However, like the chairman, I just don't know how we can distinguish this case, and I also question why we would want to from the precedent that has been provided in the proposed order and staff's recommended approach. I agree that the precedent here leads us to the proposed order that Mr. Fisk has put in front of us. There was one part of the chairman's alternate order that responds to the joint respondents or protester, I can't remember what they're called, protest that I thought could be adopted into Mr. Fisk's order. And I can tell you which paragraphs, and Chairman, you could let me know if you agree. It's paragraph 25 and 26. Maybe 25 is already there, but 26, which is the one that explains what the hearing examiner found before and what we're doing now. You're muted.
Yeah, I was gonna say, sorry, I don't have it memorized because I have to give Mr. Fisk credit for drafting it. I just gave him some broad concepts, and he is responsible for the paragraph you're talking about here. Okay, 26, you say?
Yes.
Yeah, that was, that paragraph is about the PCAC reconciliation. And when I was looking at different proposals that were out there, I didn't see that that was a controversial item. And to me, those were the two big points in staff's recommendation that really kind of pulled the whole thing together. That it's the first one is adjust the rates as directed by Supreme Court. Next was adopt staff's recommendation concerning the reconciliation of the FPCAC. And then I thought the thing that was debatable here was this concept of when does the regulatory asset time period begin? And I mean, despite the fact that I'm pretty strong on my belief that this instance is exactly what Supreme Court told the commission to do in the US West case, so we should stick with that. I do appreciate Commissioner Ellison bringing it up because I understand what you're saying, in terms of how you framed it 2 weeks ago, that an appellate should get the value of their appeal. I think that's worth exploring. So that's also why, if we chose to explore it in this case in this way, I just wanted to set up a process where it could be done that we had a ghost of a chance of surviving an appeal in front of the Supreme Court. So anyway, having said that, I know other people can appeal other things. So who knows what'll come next from the order that gets issued today.
And I'd like to respond to Commissioner Aguilera. Yes, Commissioner, you're correct. That paragraph 26 should be included in any order. Commissioner Ellison had actually asked me to include an explanation of the scope of the reconciliation in his order. And then Commissioner O'Connell asked for an order, and I asked him if I should include that. I would include it if we go with the first order as well. You're right, that should be included in any of the orders.
I think some good arguments have been made here. I would move in favor of the order that Chair O'Connell has submitted. And my reasoning for that is that I don't think that we need to concede that this is impermissible retroactive rate making at this stage. I do think we need to go ahead and allow EPE starting on January the 1st to revise its rates, and this order does that.
I'm not intending to second this order motion, so I don't know, Commissioner Aguilera, if you want to second it, we could vote on it.
No.
Okay, so I think that motion fails due to lack of a second, and I'm going to move that we adopt the order that adopts staff's recommendations as presented in board effect, with the modification of adding paragraph 26 from what's been referred to as the O'Connell order.
I second.
Okay, so any more discussion on this? I mean, again, I very much value the discussions that we have. So seeing no further discussion, Mr. Cameron.
Commissioner Ellison,
Nay.
Commissioner Aguilera,
Aye.
Commissioner O'Connell.
Aye.
Motion passes 2-1, Mr. Chair.
Great, thank you. All right, next item on the agenda is communications with Chief of Staff. Ms. Corey, do you have any communications?
Mr. Chair, just a couple of updates. We're hopefully in the home stretch of the year, although there's a lot of cases coming your way over the next month. For the operations side of things, we are putting the final touches on our annual report, which is due tomorrow. We've just received the last, I think, draft from our publisher. So we anticipate putting that out in compliance with our statutory requirements tomorrow. The other thing that I would highlight, and this is a fun thing, is leading up to our holiday party, which will be on the 21st. We are encouraging all PRC staff to participate in the PRC Bake Off. There will be prizes. So if anyone likes a good, friendly competition and also likes prizes, I encourage them to participate in that. And I don't have any other updates. So unless you all have questions for me, I will go back off camera.
Yeah, thank you. So what happens if if it snows on the 21st?
Then we all put the baked goods outside and wait for the next non-snowy day.
Very good. I mean, we just have this amazing record of the only times there is a destructive snowstorm is also when there is a PRC opening. And we've been on Wednesday, we've been on Thursday, it doesn't matter. So anyway, I hope it comes off. Looking forward to it. Next item is communications with commissioners. I personally don't have anything to update. You are still working through process on agenda for a meeting on the 21st. And so anyway, I just telling you we're still working on it. Don't have anything firm to say at the moment, unless you feel like we do, Mr. Cameron. All right. So Commissioner Ellison or Aguilera, do you have any communications?
I don't have any this time.
Just quickly, I am scheduled to moderate a panel at the Northwestern University Electricity Dialogue it's titled Weather and the Energy Transition Policies and Preparation. And speaking of weather, I was planning to fly out today. I don't know. We're pretty snowed in here, so we'll see about that. But if I am able to fly out, I'll be moderating that panel tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. And the other update is that Cynthia, my technical advisor, and I are working on the dates for the next workshop on regional markets, and just working through some logistics so that we can see when E3, who is the consultant that did the WMEG study, is available, so that they could be hopefully here to maybe present or answer questions. And that's all I have.
There was one thing you just jogged my memory there. I did want to mention that Judy Amer and Arthur O'Donnell have been working on the draft rulemaking for reliability, and we're planning on sending that out to the utilities today or tomorrow, and I'll just get that out by single signature order, since it's still November and I'm still the commissioner doing single signature orders.
Yeah, I think tomorrow it's my job, right? So okay, so are there any other items? are we okay with adjourning? So I guess just before we adjourn, just want to finish this meeting where we started. Appreciation for the folks who have to pull these meetings together, and it was dynamic environment. I didn't know, I mean, I don't think the building closed till like 8 o'clock this morning. So anyway, thank you to all for making this happen. And with that, we're adjourned.